3,000 McCoys. So there was some strife after the Civil War. They didn't get along. They were already argumentative. But ultimately, one of them accused the other of stealing a pig. And when it went to court, the guy's family was mostly the court, and they excused him. Well, that was apparently the straw that broke the pig's back, because they'd had enough. And one night in town, in a drunken brawl, they all got drunk. They were all in the same proximity because there just aren't that many people in the town. 3 of the McCoy brothers shot and killed a Hatfield. And then it was on. Now, you might think that seems kind of extreme, and it does. There were other things involved. It's not just that. But ultimately, it comes back to a pig and a disagreement resulted in a death. Well, it didn't stop there, and that's the thing. It did not stop there. It escalated to the point where there was actually an assault on a homestead on New Year's Day where they caught the family unawares, and that's where the 2 children were killed. Is a pig worth that? I hope not. I hope nobody agrees that a pig is worth that. It took 3 decades for them to come to an end. The governors of West Virginia and Kentucky, because they lived right on the borders of each other, threatened to bring in the state militia to stop the violence. That's how bad this was. It gained national attention. This is not AI generated. This is an actual newspaper telling the story of the Hatfield and McCoy struggle. And it wasn't until 2003, this started in 1880. It wasn't until 2003 that the descendants rather, sat down and formally ended the feud. Is that amazing? All over a pig. You gotta be kidding me. Now, maybe you haven't taken it that far. Maybe you haven't gone to the point where you're actually assaulting homesteads and everything else. But man, if you watch the news, there are people assaulting people all the time. It might be physical, it might be verbal, it might be mental. But there's a lot of discord going on. As Jesus followers, we not only have a responsibility, but I think we have an opportunity to show the world a different way to live. A way that doesn't result in the nuclear option, but rather deals with it up front so that we can all get along. Now, I'm not talking like gloss over things, let's all get together, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya. No, we need to deal with it, but we need to deal with it in a way that Jesus would, that brings wholeness and reconciliation, forgiveness and grace. And it is possible. Maybe you have that relative in your family tree, you know, the one that you don't really invite to family reunions. Or if you do, you just kind of keep your distance from them. Or maybe you have that coworker that you make sure that you're not in proximity to their desk at the same time they are. You know, right, when they get up to go to the water cooler, that's your chance to go to the bathroom because you don't have to cross paths. Don't ask me how I know that. It's here at church. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, totally kidding. But speaking of church, hey, you know what happens here? The place that you would think we would be most whole, most forgiving, most filled with grace, it happens here. And maybe you've experienced this. Like I know people that won't go to the same times if you have multiple services. This was back in Kentucky, don't worry. But there were multiple services, and people would not go to the late service because they knew so-and-so was there. A brother or sister in Christ. Am I the only one that is befuddled by that? See, there's a word we don't use enough, befuddled, right? So we, as Jesus followers, have this opportunity as we look at ourselves in the mirror. There we go. Hopefully we're seeing more like Jesus every day. And if we're not, then that's a wake-up call for us. Because like I said, the world needs what we have, and this is one of the greatest opportunities. When you see all the strife and all the struggle and all that in the world, there's 2 reactions to that. Man, this place is messed up. You know what? I'm just going to stay out of it. I'm going to step back, and I don't want to get involved. That's one way, but it's not the Jesus way. Jesus would step fully into that. And not in a confrontational way, in like we think of, like with fists and shouts and insults, but he would lead with grace. His end goal would be restoration, reconciliation, togetherness. We have a tremendous opportunity. The job is needed. The job security is good because as long as people are around, there's going to be a need for this. So we're going to go into a setting today. I don't know if my battery's dead or what. I'm just going to say next. Yes, all right. The setting is in 2 Samuel chapter 2, if you want to follow along in your app or your Bible. And the story is about Joab. And you might guess by the slide that he kind of held a grudge. So you could say that, right? So Joab was the general. He was a soldier's soldier. He was very good. He was a general of David, as in King David. And the other main character in the story is named Abner. Abner was also a soldier's soldier. He was a general for King Saul. So you can already see how this is setting up, right? And so what happened is these two different generals had companies of men, and they were traveling, and they arrived at the same oasis in the desert and sat across looking at each other. Now, this is an interesting study, because if two groups of women got together, it would be a whole different thing. It would be, oh, girl, where did you get that outfit? That is so cute. It's like, hey, what are you doing? You want to go out and grab some lunch? But you know what the men did? Hey, why don't we pick some of our best fighters and have a fight? And that's what they did. They picked 12 men from each side and had a fight. And I'll read it here, and then we'll fill you in a little bit about what goes on and what goes on afterwards, because it's an amazing story. They got nothing. The Hatfields and McCoys got nothing on these guys. Let's check it out. And as we read, I want you to reflect on next. This is the question of the day. Is it worth it? Now you're going to say, well, what is it? Stay tuned. But this is the question. Is it worth it? 2 Samuel 2:26 through 28. Oh, and I should say, that just to set the stage a little bit here. So, yes, the 12 men fight. Well, they end up killing each other. And so now they're incensed, right? And so this pursuit happens where Joab says, oh, no, you didn't. And Abner says, oh, no, you didn't. And so then they go after each other. Well, Joab's men do a little better job than Abner's. Abner's in full retreat. Abner is running away because he knows he's beaten and he's going to live to fight another day. The problem is that Joab has a brother who is very fast, very swift, and he is pursuing Abner with a vengeance. So much so that Saul looks over his shoulder and says, hey, is that you? Are you Joab's brother? He goes, yes, I am. He goes, please don't pursue me. I don't want any more of this. But he doesn't stop. Now, Abner, this is Saul's general, to his credit, hits him with the butt end of the spear to try and just knock him the wind out of him so he can keep going. But he does it so forcefully that he kills the brother of Joab. So it wasn't enough that Joab lost 12 men. Now Joab has lost a brother. So you can imagine how bad this is. As Abner flees, he finally gets to a point where they're still pursuing him. He gets to a hilltop, and he gives kind of his last stand. And this is the scene now. So Abner is on a hill. Joab's men are surrounding him, and they're ready to just wipe him out. And this is where we pick up the story. The men of Benjamin rallied behind Abner. They formed themselves into a group and took their stand on a hill. Abner, that's Saul's general, called out to Joab, must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their fellow Israelites? Joab answered, as surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued pursuing them until morning. So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the troops came to a halt. They no longer pursued Israel, nor did they fight anymore. These are the words of God for the people of God, and for these words we are grateful. So after all this bloodlust, after all this killing, all it took was for one guy to say, don't you realize this is going to end in bitterness? Why do you pursue your fellow Israelites? And he does two masterful things there. As dumb as he was at the beginning to start the fight, he does two masterful things. One is he says, hey, let's step back from what's happening. And let's trace this course of action that we're taking and see where it's going to end. It's going to end in bitterness. Is that what you want? And then the other masterful thing he does is he recalls that hey, we are family. We're fellow Israelites. Why do you pursue your fellow Israelites? And so the first lesson I learned from this is before you look at that person across the aisle or across the workplace or wherever, across the kitchen table, recognize that we are brothers and sisters together, created by one God. That's a great starting point. Remember that we are family, and you don't have to like them. You don't have to like your family, but you do have to love them. That's what God says. So we got to figure out how to do that. And he does a masterful job at that by reflecting that we are brothers. And what is the path that you're taking? It's going to be bitterness. Bitterness has disastrous results. I've never seen bitterness work out well. I've never seen bitterness bear good fruit. I've never seen bitterness as a goal of anybody who's a sane individual. You wake up in the morning, you know what, today I'm going to be bitter. Nobody chooses that, right? It just gets put upon us. So we have to figure out, how do we counteract that? How do we rise above that? And I'm not talking about just put on your happy face and pretend like nothing's wrong, because that doesn't work either. We have to have something more concrete. And for that, we turn to the United States Navy SEALs. Seriously, right? Let's see if it works. Hey, there we go. They use a process called a worm. We got to worm our way out of the situation. So you might imagine that Navy SEALs operate in some pretty wild environments. Things don't always go according to plan. Things can fall apart. They have to have a way to immediately stop what's happening in their headspace, get right, and react quickly. So they worm. This is, I can't claim originality here. This is Commander Mark Devine. He's a retired Navy SEAL. If you ever want to read some of his stuff, Way of the SEAL, Unbeatable Mind, that's all him. So, but I took his stuff and spiritualized it. So I don't think Mark is into Bible verses, but that's my addition. So anyway, here's what you do. First of all, you witness, then you interdict, then you redirect, and then you have a mantra. And now before anybody goes, oh, Pastor Bill's getting all new age talking about a mantra. No, the mantra is a phrase that means this is what you say over and over to yourself. Because once you get through this process, you've stopped what's going on and you've redirected, but you need some guideposts to keep going in the same direction, else you be sucked right back in to where you just left. So how do we do this? How do we witness? That's a good start. Next. All right, so witness. This is where you stop, literally, and maybe it's physically, but it's certainly mentally. You stop what you're doing and ask yourself, is this what I really want? In the case of Joab, he thought he really wanted to kill Abner. But when Abner points out that this future is going to be bitterness, how many men will have to die in this bitter feud that's about to ensue? And so Joab stops. Is this what I really want? No, it's not what I really want. But then there's one more catch, see, because it's easy for us to say, yeah, that's not what I want. But they have a saying. It goes like this: actions speak louder than. So you can't just say it. You've got to do something with it. So the consequent question is, am I acting to get what I want? So when you're in a situation and it looks like it's going south, the first thing we do is we stop, almost pick yourself up outside yourself and look and say, is this what I really want? And am I acting in a way to get what I really want? Now, I'm going to add one wrinkle here. This isn't the Navy SEALs. This is Jesus followers, which are far more dynamic and enduring, right? Jesus followers would say, it's not really about what I want. What is it really about? It's about what Jesus would want. Right? So we have another layer that we take on. One of the Bible verses that is handy to talk about this idea of witnesses, 2 Corinthians 10:5, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and get this, we take captive the thoughts and make it obedient to Christ. It's time to stop reacting. It's time to go, oh, he made me mad. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry, I'm not going to say that. I say not so, right? You have a choice. We always have a choice. If you want to read an excellent book, this just came up in the discussion this week, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Read that and talk about the power of choice in the most dire of circumstances. There is no circumstance where you don't have a choice of what you pick here, right? So nobody made you do anything. You couldn't help. No, that's an excuse. We're not into excuses. We're into results. So let's just put that aside. We take captive every thought. We have a choice. We don't have to be acted upon. We can choose to act. And that's what the world needs. Next slide. Next, you interdict. So you're going down a path and it's not going good. You have to not only step back and look at where you're going, you have to go, I can't continue to go this way. I need to go some other way. So that's what we call interdict. So what should I do right now to move forward towards what I really want? That's a easy question to ask and a hard one to follow. What should I do right now in this moment? And maybe you need to pause and take a breath. And this is what always fascinates me when I read this stuff from the Navy SEALs are talking about this very dynamic environment. So we're talking in the middle of a firefight, and they actually stop and do this process. And they think for a minute while stuff's whizzing around and going off around them. And you might think that's counterintuitive. Like I would be down in the dirt trying to hide. But to say, if you don't do that, the results will be disastrous. If you do this, you have a chance. But if you don't, it's no good. So don't pretend that you have some situation that is more dire than a Navy SEAL that says, I couldn't help it, I just had to do that. No, I'm sorry. I'm taking all our excuses away this morning, and I'm including myself in that. No more excuses. We have a choice. We can act in a way that will move towards what we really want. Maybe that's just a moment where you take a breath and you say a quick prayer like, God, help me go the way you want me to go. Show me something. And you better do it quick. It's like praying for patience, right? God, give me patience and give it to me now, right? So what is it that I really want? This is where I throw it, Romans 12:2. This is one of my favorites. Don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Society puts on us ways that we're expected to act. I see this all the time in kids. I used to coach kids soccer when my girls were growing up. Girls are a little bit different, but you certainly heard it from the boys and some girls. And I'm talking about trash talk. Man, kids these days have a master's, maybe even a PhD level of trash talking. They got trash talking I never had. I will never aspire to what they're capable of, right? And if you're in sports, you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? So society says, well, if somebody insults you, you got to insult them back. And not just back, but better, right? You got to one-up them. And what happens is we one-up each other in these insults and we escalate, right? So one up is really one down, if you think about it, right? And the kids are good at this. So where did they learn that? Uh-oh. They learned it from us. Exactly. So this is a chance for us to not conform to what the world expects. The world expects that if you steal a pig, we're going to shoot you. Not really. But if you live in Kentucky or West Virginia in the 1880s, that was a thing, right? What if we acted counter to the world? Now, who would we be taking after if we acted counter to this world? Jesus. There's the first softball of the day. Excellent. Nice hit. All right. So be transformed by the renewing of our mind. The next one, we redirect. And this is one of my favorite questions. And it works better when you've had a deep breath and a second to think. How can I honor God in whatever happens next? You can't always control what happens to you. You get put into situations. Sometimes you get caught off guard. Maybe you've had a lack of sleep. Maybe you're not feeling so good. Maybe you haven't had your coffee yet. Whatever it is, it always hits you at the worst time, doesn't it? So you can't control what happens. You can't control what other people say or do. You can't even control some of the situations that you're in. That's life. I'm not making that up. But what you can ask yourself is, okay, here I am, not feeling good, not having caffeine, in this situation that I didn't ask for. But here's the key question. Whatever happens next, how can I honor God? Taking that second to pause and reframe changes everything. It may not change the other person. It may not change the situation, but guess what it does change? It changes us. And that's a great place to start because that's the one thing that we can control. There's no sense railing against the wind. There's no sense saying, seas, go back and stop, unless your name is Jesus. You can't control that. We can only control ourselves. And as I look at the world around us, it's high time we started controlling ourselves. Maybe you agree. Philippians 4:8, one of my favorites. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. How can I honor God? Whatever happens next. And as you look at the list listed here in Philippians 4:8, those aren't expectations of the world, or at least not the way that Jesus would see them. The expectations of the world are entirely different. But we are called to be different. We are called to stand out. We're called to be light in the darkness. We're called to bring hope where there is no hope. We're called to provide healing where there is hurt. The tagline of this church, I don't know if you can see it back there. Oh, actually, it's covered up. Life is different. Life is different because we are countercultural by nature. As a Jesus follower, if you are truly following Jesus, you will be counter to culture. And I'm saying that's a great thing. That's something to be celebrated. That's something to pursue with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. So we have witnessed, we have interdicted, we have redirected, and now it's time for the mantra, and not the New Age kind. All right, mantra. So here's where you have to do some homework, because like I said before, you started down this path, whether it was your choice or not. You realize, whoops, this isn't where I want to go. You've interdicted that. You stopped it. You've redirected. Now you're on a different path. You're on the path that's following Jesus. But if you don't have guideposts out in front of you, you're going to go right back to where you were. And sometimes, especially if it's a heated thing or if it's a personal attack, man, this step for me is like a slalom. Like a skier, right? It would be nice, I redirected and look, all is well, he's going to Jesus. No, that's not the way it works for me. It's like a slalom skier, man. He's up, he's down, he's up, he's down, he's up, he's down. I just hope to be more up than down. All right, so however many times you need to do this, continue to do this until you're actually following the way that Jesus follows. Now, here's how I do this. Here's where you need to do some homework. I have 3 go-tos that I go for, and it depends on what's happening to me. My first one is Joshua 1:9. I use that when I'm feeling attacked and I need to display courage or strength. Who knows what Joshua 1:9 says? Bingo. Be strong. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, for I, the Lord, am with you always. So whenever I feel like I need to display some courage, but I don't have it, and I'm trying to run from it, this is the one that I pull out. This is the guidepost that keeps me going. The second one is John 7:37-38. I use this when I'm tired, when I'm worn out, when I got nothing left, because it says, whoever believes in me, as the scriptures have said, out of their heart will flow streams of living water. That's not me. That's him. If I use my streams of living water, if I use my patience, my grace, my love, it is finite, and it will run out sometimes quicker than others. Depends on who I'm talking to. Bill, you're a pastor. I know. I'm also human. I don't know if you know that, right? But this is one of those things that you got to come back to again and again. This is not my love. This is not my grace. This is not my forgiveness. It's his. And if it flows out of my heart like streams of living water, there is no end to that. There is nothing that you can do to outlast God's patience and grace and forgiveness. You can outlast mine. That's not that hard. But his, you can't outlast that. I got more where that came from. And that's what I go to in those times when I feel the need to extend grace beyond what I am capable of. My last one, Psalm 1:1-3. This is a reminder that it's not always 24/7 rainbows and unicorns. It's not always pleasantry. There are seasons in life. The season may last for an hour, a day, a week, a year. But there are seasons. And it says, those who are righteous are like a tree planted by a well-watered stream. In their season, they will bear fruit, and everything they do will prosper. But you know what? In their season, they bear fruit. But what happens when it's out of season? Sometimes there's not fruit. Sometimes you can't see it. Sometimes you feel like I have nothing left to give. I have given all my fruit. I have nothing. It's just a season. Maybe you're in that season right now. Maybe you're in that season where you're like, I feel like I should be producing fruit. I feel like I should be doing something, but I feel empty. Like I've got nothing. And it's just a season. It's just a season. And if we are like trees planted by a well-watered stream, there will also then be a season where we bear fruit. And that fruit will be amazing because we serve an amazing God. So these are the ways that I redirect myself and keep myself going down the path that Jesus would be more proud of than Bill would be proud of, right? So do your homework, insert your own ways, your own, quote, mantras, not the New Age kind, right? And ask yourself, as we started, what is a pig worth? What is it worth? Next slide. Is it worth the bitterness of 3 decades of struggle? Is it worth the lives of 13 people? Is it worth the state militias of 2 states? Is that what bitterness is worth? Let me tell you what bitterness is worth. Some people would say bitterness is worth nothing. I disagree. Bitterness is a negative. See, worth insinuates some value, some positive. I say bitterness is actually a negative. It takes us below 0. It never ends well. It never produces the fruit that you want to emulate Jesus with. Bitterness is a negative. So we have to ask ourselves then, is it worth bitterness? Well, it's worth bitterness if you like depression, anxiety, if you like feeling bad, if you like being frustrated, full of hate, then it's for you. But if you're a Jesus follower, if your heart is full of love and grace, or you want it to be, then bitterness is your greatest enemy. You got to let it go for your own good. So what is worth it? I'll tell you what's worth it. A love that we cannot be separated from. Reconciliation as envisioned by Jesus Christ. Ask Jesus what reconciliation was worth. He would tell you it's worth everything. Because he gave everything. And if it's worth it to him, and I call myself a Jesus follower, should I not do the same? I want to continue to encourage you, Word Serve, to fight the good fight. And how do we do that? Well, we choose reconciliation over revenge. We choose healing over hurting. We choose Jesus, and we choose life. We don't keep living the same way that we've always lived. We don't keep living the way the world tells us to live. We do something different. And I can summarize it by saying this. Don't choose life redundant. Choose life abundant. Choose Jesus. Will you pray with me, please? God, as we face the world and the struggles around us, remind us that we are called to be countercultural. We're not called to react like the world thinks we should. And God, that is a great opportunity to stand out and witness to you. Even if we don't have anything to say, just sometimes our actions are the greatest beacon that point towards you. God, I know that I don't have this in me to do it myself. I need those streams of living water that are yours and not mine. I need your courage and not mine. I need to know that you're there beside me all the time. I know your word says that. But God, it's sometimes so easy to forget that, especially in the heat of the moment. Remind us all, God, that you are a God who never leaves us, who never forsakes us, who calls us to something greater. God, keep our minds focused on that which is pure and lovely and admirable. All of those things as we go forward. God, take us to a place where we will be your greatest witnesses in word, in deed, and in love. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.